Hey guys, my name is Jason with S&J Forest Products, and on today's video I'm going to show you how I'm replanting a forest. So I have a previous video about the site prep here, getting this ready for planting, and I'll put a card up here in the corner on one of these corners. You can check that out. But if you look behind me here, every one of these little pink flags has a tree we planted on it. Oh, there she is. There's S of S&J Forest Products. But this is the spot I went through with my skidder and scraped up all the canary grass. And we've put in about 1,250 trees. Took us about 30 to 35 hours to do so. And I've got a bunch of experiments I want to show you. But first I'll show you how I planted a tree and how the process works, talk about some of the different trees we got, and then we'll go through and look at some of the experiments. So we've got two main types of trees we've been planting. We've been planting Douglas fir, which is this one, and also western red cedar, which is this one. And these are two different types. This is a bare root 2.0 seedling, which means this tree was seeded outside in a seed bed, and it grew for 2 years. So it was planted in 2020, grew for 2 years, and they harvested this spring. And it's just bare root. You can see the roots hanging down. This is 2 years worth of growth here, and we just stick it in the ground. We dig a hole and put it in the ground. This is a seedling, a cedar plug, and this was seeded last year, so in 2021, right in a seed tray, in a plug tray, and it grew all year in that plug tray, and then they yanked them out this spring, and I got it as a 1-year plug. Now there's kind of an intermediate here as well, which is called a plug 1, where they'll take a plug and put it out in a seed bed for an additional year. And you can see the plug roots on it, but then it's got additional growth, and it's about this tall. So they like to grow cedar and hemlock in plugs because they can keep them in a greenhouse and keep the temperature and the humidity real constant, which is kind of what cedar and hemlock need to germinate. Whereas Doug fir and grand fir and some of the other ones, they can just sow right into a seed bed and grow them for 2 years. So we'll get these two in the ground, and I'll show you how I plant them. So we're standing in one of those scalped off areas I did with the skidder, and I'm just taking my long skinny shovel. I'm just going to dig a spot up here, get it all loose. Take our bare root 2.0 Doug fir, get in the ground. Come on in, Stace. You can get them, show them what it looks like in the hole. You want the roots to kind of fan out as best you can to get them growing down. The one thing you really do not want to do is J-root them. So put them in the hole like this, where all the roots are pointing back up. So you want to get the roots kind of spread out, and you don't want to handle them too much like I'm doing now, but get them spread out, and then gently cover them with dirt. Get it all packed in there. My kids call it putting it to bed. So we get it kind of tucked in, nice, gentle, just to get all the air pockets out of it around the roots. And there you go. You want them pointing up as best you can. And take a flag, stick it in, and we're done. And we were just planting those together. And I was digging the hole, and my wife was putting the trees in and doing the flags, and we were doing about a tree every minute. And this is easy planting. It's out here in the open and in the stuff. I'll show you some of the other spots we were planting in the tall grass and in under the canopy and stuff. And so this is really ideal planting. But for the cedar plugs, we'll go find another spot here, and I'll show you how to do the plug. It's a little bit easier. All right, for our plug, since the roots aren't going all over the place, you really can just open up a little spot like that in the ground. And there's something called a dibble bar, which is even easier, and it essentially just pokes a hole the size of the plug in the ground, and then you shove the plug in. But I don't have one of those with me right now. Get it all tucked in. Our site is pretty wet. You can see the standing water. There's a lot of clay in it. It's really a poor site to be growing trees. there's something called a site index or a site class, and it goes from 1 to 5, and it's based on the soil type, and primarily for Doug fir. But a class 1 site is the best of the best. The Doug fir grow really fast, really tall, and 5 is the worst, and ours is a 4. So we don't have a very good site here, but it's what I got, and so we're just planting it heavy. I'm planting the trees anywhere from 5 at the closest to sometimes 20 feet apart. And we had a bunch of kids and families down the other day helping us plant, so it was kind of a whole family affair. But yeah, like I say, we got about 1,200 trees in the ground, and we're just going to keep an eye on them over the next couple of years. Try and keep the grass away from them, keep the competition down, and hopefully by the time I'm retired, we'll have a semi-forest going here. So here's a shot looking back at our field, and I don't know if you can pick out the flags. Every one of those flags has a tree on it. We've planted 4 different types of trees. We have mostly Douglas fir and western red cedar. We also have some grand fir and some giant sequoia. So I'll go around here real quick and show you what each one of those tree types looks like, and then we'll go over and take a look at a couple different sites we got going. So this is a little grand fir. These are shade tolerant as well as moisture tolerant, so they can be planted in you know, a little bit of the wet, a little bit of the muck. This will all dry out here in the next couple of weeks. We've had a pretty wet March here, but there's a grand. Here is a cedar. There's one of those western red cedars, and this is actually a plug 1. So this was in a plug for a year and then set out in a seed bed for another year. This is a Doug fir. These are shade intolerant, so these really need to be grown out in the open. And I don't know if this is going to work, but if you pan up, we got blue sky all up above it, so it shouldn't have any problem with the sun. But it does not grow very well in heavy soils like what we have here at the clay, and probably one of the reasons why we have a site index of 4. The Doug firs just don't grow very well here. Here's another one, and again, I'm trying to keep the grass knocked down, give these guys a fighting chance. Here is one of our giant sequoias, and I got these as plugs, and it's just, I don't know, maybe 4 or maybe 6 inches tall. I don't know how well these are going to do here. We're up in northwestern Washington. These are native to California. We have some around town. They grow really, really well here. And little factoid for you, that can grow into the largest tree in the world by volume. So giant sequoias is the largest tree in the world by volume, and it starts out as a little 3-inch, 4-inch plug here. So we'll see if we can get those growing here, but if we can do those, we'll get a bunch of wood going on those, and see if we can get a forest going. So this is a site that in the previous video I cleared off with my skidder, and I just went sweeps back and forth here. And this had blackberries 6, 8, 10 feet high, salmon berries growing in here. So we got it all skidded off. It's not as wet as the other sites, and it doesn't have as much clay. It's a little bit higher. There's still a few standing puddles. But we got this planted out pretty well in Doug fir. Again, it's open to the sky, so a lot of light. And it's a little bit better site, hopefully. So hopefully they can get up and start growing pretty quick here. But now let's go take a look at some of the experiments we got going in the reed canary grass. So here's a spot where you can see on this side, obviously I did all the prep with the skidder, and on this side I left it as native canary grass. And the idea is I want to figure out how well these trees will do planted just direct right in the grass. And if I don't need to do a bunch of site prep, that'll save me time and energy and diesel and all that kind of stuff. But I got a bunch of trees out here right in the canary grass. Now the issue is going to be is this little guy here. This is a Doug. This grass will get about 6 or 8 feet tall, and this thing's about a foot above the ground. So I'm going to need to come around in about June and knock the grass down around it. I might need to weed eat around it. but get it so that thing can get some sun, because those Dougs especially are very shade intolerant. You got to keep them knocked down. And that canary grass is going to be a huge competitor because it's going to soak up all the water around that tree. That tree is going to have to fight real hard to survive growing there in the grass. Here's a grand. We intermixed species, so we got grands. Here's a little tiny cedar plug. I think that's a 1.0 plug, so that's just their, or a plug, so that's a year-old tree. But we'll see how they do in the canary grass. This is a spot over here where I thinned out a bunch of alder. It was grown thick dog hair like that, and I got it thinned out to maybe a stem every 15 or 20 feet. And I was hoping that if I could get them to grow in the grass without a bunch of site prep, if I can get these trees up 8, 10, 12 feet, I'm hoping they'll shade out all this canary grass and kill it. Because this canary grass all in here is real invasive, and it comes in and it just smothers everything that on the ground. Nothing can seed, nothing can grow, and it just kills everything. So I'm trying to get these trees jump started, and I'm trying to use the alders in here to help, because these alders, these red alders, are nitrogen fixers. And so I left some. They don't shade out too much light, so hopefully the Doug fir can still grow up and the cedar can grow up underneath them. But as a nitrogen fixer, they might be able to fertilize these trees as they get growing up through. And the alder live, 50 to 75 years. So the conifers are going to grow up through here, and these alders are going to start falling over, blowing down, rotting away in the next 50 years or so. And then we'll have a whole evergreen conifer forest coming up through. Here's another spot where I thinned these alder out, this dog hair alder, and I've come in and I've planted trees. I'll tell you, it sucks planting in the slash. It's no fun at all. It's way better to plant out in that open field where it's all been scalped off. But yeah, this is one of those other spots where the alder is going to fertilize the trees, and these will grow up as the alders die out. So here's an interesting little test plot. I've been doing a lot of reading about spacing for growing up Douglas fir, and kind of the rule of thumb is 10-foot spacing. But there are some really interesting studies done by Weyerhaeuser in the 90s where they experimented with different spacing, and they planted them as close as 3 feet, so a meter apart, and as far as about 15 feet. And what they found is when they're planted a meter apart, they grow really fast, a lot faster than if they're planted 10 or 15 feet apart for about the first 8 or 10 years. And then after 8 or 10 years, they're so close that they start crowding each other out. But what they found is that the trees can kind of sense each other is so close by infrared light. And so they know that there's another tree growing right next to it. And so they push really hard to grow up fast. And in this study, at 10 years old, the trees were 25% taller and 33% bigger around diameter at breast height, DBH, than the ones planted 10 or 15 feet apart. Now, that's great for the first 10 years, but then after 10 years, you got to come in and you got to thin them out so that they're not competing with each other. Because if you leave them so closely spaced, you're just going to have dog hair forest, and they're going to be real little tiny spindly things. But I got a little test plot going here. I got 50 trees all planted on a 1 meter grid, 3-foot grid. And so I want to compare these 50 trees in the next 5 to 10 years with the other ones I got going in the grass and out in the scalped areas, to see if I can actually get them to grow up a lot faster and shade out this canary grass sooner than planting them at 10 or 15 feet apart and taking a lot longer to get up to height. Now here's another experiment I got going. These are 3 Doug firs planted in a little bunch. There's 1, 2, 3. They're less than a foot apart. And I was figuring that if these guys can think that they're being, attacked or have close competition, then they're going to have the same effect as this plot over here where they have the 3-foot spacing. But I've got 3 here, and then 10 feet apart I got 3, and then 10 feet apart I got 3. And so hopefully for 10 years, these will think they're competing with each other, so they grow up really fast. And then I can come in with loppers or a saw and just slash 2 of them and leave the third one there to grow. And I'll have my 10-foot spacing roughly that'll grow another 10 or 15 years, and then I can come in and thin those 10-foot spacing out to 20. So I've been real curious about, how fast my trees grow, what kind of site I have. This tree right back here is a spruce. It's a Sitka spruce. And it's one of the bigger trees on my property. I have several that big, but that's about the max height and DBH I have. And this tree is easily 30 inches, if not 36 inches diameter breast height. And it's about 120 feet tall. And I did the calculation on this, and I've had enough of them blow over, and I've bucked some and felled some, that I know that these trees are all about 120 to 130 years old. So they're growing about a foot a year for the last 120 years. And I did the calculation. If you take that bole there, that trunk of that tree, all the way to the top, and you figure that that tree grows 1/10 of an inch per year, so it puts on 1/10 of an inch of growth per year. I did the calculation. I pretended that's a cone with a base of 36 inches and a top of 120 feet. And that thing puts on somewhere around 3 cubic feet of wood every year. So every year it grows, it puts on 3 cubic feet of wood, which, is a lot of wood, I guess. But the whole tree, also I did the calculation, the whole tree has about 200 to 225 cubic feet of wood in it, not including the branches, not including the roots. So that's a lot of wood, and it's packing on about a 1 to 1.5% per year of wood, which is a lot. So these big trees, they pack on way more wood than these small little seedlings that I got growing in the ground here. And so we'll go and take another look at another Doug that was planted about 25 years ago, and we'll do the same calculation, figure out how much cubic feet that thing puts on. Now, for comparison to that spruce, here's some Doug fir that are about 25 years old, and they're about 35 feet tall and 6 inches DBH down here. And I did the same calculation where I took this as a cone, 6 inches at the bottom, 35 feet high, and that whole tree, that entire 35-foot tree, if I did my math right, which check me on it, has 3 cubic feet of wood in it. So it took 25 years for this tree to put on as much wood as that one spruce did in 1 year. So you can see how fast the big trees can put on wood compared to these little tiny trees. You say, oh, I'll go plant a forest and it'll be great. Well, it will be great in 100 years. It'll really make a difference. But man, this tree hasn't made a whole lot of difference in the last 25 years it's been growing. But now that it's up 25 feet, you have this 35-foot cylinder that you're going to start packing wood on every year. So I got curious and I did the calculation about, okay, if that spruce does about 1 to 1.5% of wood per year, what does a tree like this do? And if I estimate that this growth is about 1/4 inch per year, this tree puts on about 1/3 of a cubic foot every year, which is 10% of the total volume of that tree. So this tree increases its volume by 10% every year at this stage of life compared to those big ones that only do 1.5. All right, guys, well, thanks for watching our video. My name is Jason.
And I'm Stacy.
And we are S&J Forest Products. So thanks again, and we'll see you on the next video.